Well, this week was a really weird week. Tech's supposed to win, and they got demolished by the Bobcats. The Lightning were supposed to do at least well. They didn't win. They didn't get a single point at all. And a few of their teams clinched the playoffs as we move into Week 15. This is Sports Hour. Well, last week was a pretty weird week. There were some pretty decent games and some pretty. There were some actually basic games that actually ended up being in the exact opposite outcome, which usually would have thought would have happened. But it turns out to be that's how some of these games work. As we go through this week, we have a interesting. We do have a interesting effect off of this week. Now, this week was, in fact, one of those weeks that we thought was probably going to be a little bit better than it actually ended up happening. I'll take a look in here. The Fox and Giants faced off first. The Giants absolutely demolished the Foxes. Tigers and Hawks, no surprises. Tigers won that one. Packers and Ravens were able to play out. Packers were favored by 16. They won by a little more than 16. The Pirates were defeated by the Indians. The Leland Cats and the Lightning played on Monday. And final score was 122-0. Now, in some of these other games have occurred in the past where teams just couldn't score because they got a lot of penalties. There was a total of 2 penalties done by the Lightning the entire game. No penalties by the Leland Cats, which was a score which they gave only 2 points. So the real score should be 122-2. But unfortunately, that was negated from one penalty that did occur, which kind of hurts that team. Unfortunately for them, the Lightning are already eliminated from the playoffs anyway, so it didn't make much of a difference. We had the Werewolves in the 8th inning play. The 8th inning were able to win that one. The Warriors were defeated by the Otters. The Kings and Huskies faced off. No surprises. The Huskies won that game. We had the Cardinals and Panthers. Panthers scored 203 points. And if you think that's a record, well, you were pretty close. It's actually the 4th highest scoring game in the NBA history. 3 of them had the Panthers. Panthers and Jets went to the second overtime at the time. That was several years ago, where it was 246 to 240, if I'm correctly. 233. to 230 was the final score in that game. That game was in 2016. 2015, the year before we actually went live with this Sports Hour series. There's been a few other games that have been pretty high scoring too, but both of them have been not this high scoring. Panthers have 3 of the highest scoring games in NBL history. This is the 3rd highest. They had a game a couple years ago that was 198, 207 points. So this is actually the 3rd highest score. Before that, and then there was an absolute sadness scene. The Cardinals didn't do what they needed to do. Then we had the Knights and the Dogs. Dogs were able to win that game. Knights are favored. Dogs end up winning because I was the one got that one right. That game was actually very important to the playoff position. We'll talk about that in a few minutes here. The Saints were able to beat the Legends out. It's not really much of a surprise. Colts beat the Bears. The Stars lost to the Beagles. Dragons lost to the Jets. UNC was able to beat out the Dolphins, I think for their 2nd time. That might have been their 1st time. We're going to confirm that in a second. The Browns lost to the Bulldogs. The Angels barely lost to the Falcons. So the Falcons lost that game by 2. Superman and his went in one of the lowest scoring games of the year. Not the lowest scoring game. We've had some pretty low scoring games, but they did go pretty bad. Neither one of them was able to score very much at all. The Techs were demolished by the Bobcats. The Bobcats basically did one thing that they've done all year. They've done really well in the 4th quarter, and they allowed 0 points in the 4th quarter. Well, they scored a lot of points in the 4th quarter, which did help them out quite a bit. Then we had the Lions and Lynx. Lynx were able to beat them by 1 in overtime. Looking at the UNC and Dolphins game, I think UNC and Dolphins are way down here. I have to confirm. I'm just going to have to confirm what UNC. Yeah, so if you see the Dolphins, UNC and Dolphins have played, and it was back. So the Dolphins have lost both times. So right now, if they were even in position of playoffs, the UNC would be in a better position. Unfortunately, they're not in the playoffs either. We'll talk about the playoffs in a second here. We got good hands. I'm still way ahead. I don't think I'm going to be able to take caught at this point. 220 minus 195. Yeah, I think there's a theory they would have to do really well and I have to do terribly over his last week. I had a .78. I went nearly perfect this week. I had the highest score of everyone here. But that's irrelevant. Pretty much everyone had a really good score this week. Runner had the worst, which is why Runner is still in last and probably going to remain last. Let's take a look at the divisions. We've got a lot of playoffs made in here. The Panthers clinched into the position, so they have clinched the position. They have the best offense and the 4th best defense. When almost 2,000 points, they'll have 2,000 points next week, most likely. The Dogs also have clinched a position. They cannot be eliminated from the playoffs at this point in time with a 9-3-1 record. Now, the Browns have a higher position only because they are division leaders, and they have also locked. Everyone in the NBL North has been locked for the division leaders. We don't know yet of which of these other teams are going to make it in, and in theory, any one of these teams in bowls could make it into the playoffs still, but it requires for the Cardinals and the Angels to make it in. They have to win both games, and the Saints have to lose both games. And the Knights, four of these four teams, all of them have to lose. It's 0-2. They have to lose. And I don't think it's even possible for that. The Cardinals and the Angels would have to win both games and put themselves at 8-8. That's just to get into the playoffs. The Knights, while in theory are pretty much insured, they're not quite insured yet. If both the Pirates and the Giants and the Saints, am I right about that? Not quite. I think actually the Knights have clinched as well. Am I right? Because look at this. If you look at the 8th position, these are only teams that can actually make the playoffs at this point in time. 8-8 is not going to be better than that. So actually, I believe they have clinched as well. They're going to confirm that with me. Yes, they confirmed it. They have clinched the playoff position. So it comes down to really these last two seeds, and any of these teams could make it in theory, but it really comes down a win for the Pirates, a win for the Giants, a win for either one of these teams pretty much ensures them to make it into the playoffs. 2 wins would be required for any of them to make the playoffs, and the Cardinals are already in that same division. As for everyone else, over here, Bulldogs and lower, they have been eliminated. They cannot make it into the playoffs at this time. Maybe we'll have better luck next year. I mean, we've already clinched 6 positions. Now, the positions themselves, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, have not been decided yet. They'll be decided after these last 2 weeks have been determined. Because in theory, the Panthers can still win. In theory, the Panthers can still win the division, can win the bye. Tigers can technically still win the bye with 2 Panthers losses, and the Indians both losing as well. But it comes down to a lot of things to this. So right now, all of these teams are insured into the playoffs with these records. And basically, just because the Giants are going to be the 4th seed, there's no way they're not going to be a 4th seed. And there's no possibility they can't be a 4th seed. They are the 4th seed leaders. There's no one that can actually take them out. So basically, while in theory, the Angels and the Saints can both do well enough to get into the playoffs, they cannot they cannot get into the division amount. On the other side, we got a couple of clinches here. We got the Leland Cats, we got the Otters, the Packers, which, by the way, first time the Packers have ever made the playoffs. So that's a benefit. Huskies have already clinched, and I believe they've clinched the number 1 seed as well. There's no other team that can actually do better than that. They got the number 1 seed. Then we got the Colts. They've made the playoffs. They have not ensured the number 1 seed yet, but likelihood is if the Tex lose, or the Colts, if the Tex lose, then they have clinched. They'll clinch that seed. As for this one, they are battling it out. And here's the bad news. It's not going to be easy for the Otters to be able to win the division anymore. Now, if you look at the Otters division, and I gotta remember which one's Otters. Otters' last 2 games are the Panthers and the Dogs. Which are pretty tough games. Panthers are probably going to lose against the Panthers, which will probably knock them down. And guess what? The Packers have a really easy next game. It's going to come down to really what happens in this last week. Because I bet you the Packers are going to win this week. Although I said that last week, too, about certain teams, and that didn't work. I think the Otters are going to lose. They're going to be tied. It's going to come down to the last week. And in theory, looking at the Otters are 1-1 when it comes down to that. And if we were looking at the actual division, if they tie at the end of the season, the Packers actually get the division. The way it's determined off of that is because if we calculate the entire, you can't see this, but there's an 86 plus a 72, which is 158 points. So we have Packers and we have Otters. Packers currently have 158 points in their games. The Otters have 159 points. So, in real theory, actually, the Otters will clinch. We'll get the seed. But it does come down to this. It's 1 point difference. If the Packers go 2-0, the Panthers and the Otters will lose this week, and then they will. Let's say the Panthers. What guys is the Packers have to win both these next 2 weeks in order for them to clinch the division. The Otters will have to lose as well, and then they will also have to lose against the Dogs, which I think is in theory possible. However, they're tied, which as of right now, the Otters do have the position when it comes to it. It comes down to this. So the Otters have to lose both games. The Packers have to win both games. That is the only way the Packers can clinch that division. Now, they've already made the playoffs. It's the first time they've ever made the playoffs. So, good news for them. I know you guys may not believe that necessarily. Yeah, playoff records. Here it is. Look, here we got this down here, Packers. They have 35 wins prior to this season. They've never made the playoffs. Now, there are a few other teams that haven't made the playoffs as well. I mean, we've got several other teams. You have the Bears haven't made the playoffs. You have the Kings. They've never made the playoffs. And you've got the Huskies, which will make the playoffs after this year. So we know that the Huskies have already made the playoffs for sure. And you know that, here's the thing. The Bears, they can't make playoffs. They're not going to make the playoffs. They're going to be, give or take, probably 7-27. But some of these teams have only been around one season. The Bears have already been around one season. Of course they're not going to be good. Kings have only been around one season. Packers have been around since 2008 and have not made any playoff appearances. Huskies have not made any playoff experiences either, but they have actually been close several times. They were the Westville prior to this year, so that's another thing about that, and that's a big thing going into this season. World playoffs won't be decided until next season off of this year either, but until later this year. But this is very close. This is about the closest you can get. Now, in theory, when you're talking about between the Packers and the Otters, this is so close. I think it's going to be the Otters will lose this week against the Panthers. I'm sorry, that's probably what's going to happen for anyone who's fans of an Otter. the Otters. Um, the Lightning's gonna Packers are gonna beat the Lightning. Don't see And Packers have beaten some of the really good teams. They're actually on a 3-game win streak. I think no 4-game win streak. Their last loss was against the Otters, by the way. But they have won 4 of their last games. And that's pretty huge when it comes to this. And they are going to be in the playoffs, as we know. Also, I thought at the beginning of the season the Packers were going to be last. Clearly, I'm wrong about that. I think I'm right about the Lions being in that position, though. All right, let's talk about the teams that are eliminated. All these in this slide. All of these teams are eliminated. Now, you might say this: why aren't any of these in? Because they are insured. Unfortunately for them, anyone's Beagles, all the way up to here, any of them could get the 6th, 7th, and 8th seeds. So unfortunately, we can't determine who's going to win that. Who's going to do that? And it's going to be a very tough game. I'm really looking forward to seeing this. It's going to be really weird, though. I'm worried, and I think this is going to be what's going to happen, is the Packers and Otters are going to play in round 1. I feel like the Packers, even though they will be good enough, I think they're not going to have. They're going to be good enough. This will actually put them at a 12 and 4 record. Ours will be down to an 11 and 5 record, if I'm correct. It's going to be interesting. They will probably play at some point during this. Meanwhile, over here, we got some pretty tough games going on. Let's take a look at Week 15. Week 15 is going to be an interesting week. Or they've already done predictions for this week for that. These are all going to be really tough games. A lot of these games are really going to be close. We got the Dogs and the Ravens. Bad news for people who thought the Ravens are going to win this week game. Ravens are favored by 5. I don't see they're going to do that, though. I'm going to go with the Dogs winning this game. We got the Werewolves and the Pirates. Pirates are a whole lot better in this case. I'm going to go with the Pirates winning this game. We get our game of the week, please. Yeah. Bears and Dragons. I don't think the Dragons are going to have any chance of losing this game, so we are going with the Dragons. We got the Bulldogs and the Leland Cats. Leland Cats did some sad things last week and actually demolished a team. I'm going to go with the Cats winning this game. I think it's going to be a pretty close game, though, in the end. We get the Beagles and UNC. And here's the thing about Beagles and UNC's game. It plays at 9 o'clock on Monday in the morning. UNC is just doing better right now, and unfortunately, I think that is going to be the game that puts the Beagles out of the playoff position. Bobcats and the Warriors. Bobcats win this game. I think the only game that they even have a chance of winning with the Warriors was against the Stars, and unfortunately, I don't think they're going to have any chance. I don't think they don't play again, right? No. Unfortunately, I don't think the Stars are going to do well at all those next couple weeks either. So, yeah, I think, honestly, with the Warriors, they're just probably going to finish the season off maybe with a strong win in the end. But looking at the Warriors, where are the Warriors? I think they're going to beat one of these two teams. I don't think they're going to beat both of them, though. So, I think the Warriors are going to get a second win, maybe, but probably are not going to be good enough to do anything out of that. Probably, I'm thinking they're going to have a number 2 pick this next year. Lynx and the Chargers. This is actually a tough game. And this game is not the game of the week, but it's pretty close to being the game of the week. Basically, it comes down to this: Lynx must win this game to stay in the playoff hunt. Looking at the Lynx right now. Where are the Lynx are down here? I'm sorry, looking on it. Are right outside the playoffs. They must win. The Athens or the Techs must lose. And the fact is, they're playing the Chargers. This is a team they must beat in order to be able to make it into the playoffs. If they do not win this week, they will be out. And the Chargers, we already know, are pretty much insured into the playoffs. They're in the 6th seed. They could, if they win, if the Chargers win, they are insured into the playoffs. If the Lynx lose, they're out of the playoffs. So it comes down to this: they need to win this game. I guess some bad news though for that week. The Chargers are going to be really good and really strong. While I do want to see the Lynx win this game, I am going to pick the Chargers to win this game. I do think they just have a stronger team basis overall. We got the Giants and Legends. Giants are doing really well and strong. I don't think the Giants are going to be in the playoffs as the end of the season. They are currently in the playoffs right now, but they're kind of on the edge. They're on the 8th seed right now. So, sorry, I don't know if the Giants are going to make it into the playoffs, but they could, and I think it comes down to this week. We got. I put the wrong position. Still put in the wrong position. We got ourselves the Lions and the Foxes. Lions must win this week if they want to get into the playoffs. Unfortunately, the Foxes are don't do particularly well when it comes down to this game. I'm going to go with the Lions to win this week, and I think honestly that is going to probably knock them into the playoff position, out of the playoff position. I think they're already out anyways, but it's not going to be good for them. You got the Hawks and the Dolphins. Both these teams are terrible. Both of them are not in the playoffs, so they're playing for nothing right now. So it comes down to me to say that I think it's going to be a pretty sad game for both these teams. I favor the Hawks slightly here, but not by much. The Dolphins have a slightly better team, I think, in the end. But looking at the last couple of weeks the Hawks have had, the Hawks have done some pretty sad games. But they're Indians, and they're not doing well. And the Dolphins are just going to be no difference from that. So, unfortunately, while we would love to see the Hawks win, it's going to be the Dolphins that win this week. We got the Lightning and Packers. The Lightning are going to win that game. No, they're not. If there's Packers are winning this game, they couldn't even show up. The Lightning didn't score a single point. They scored 2 points technically, but both there was negated from a penalty, which won 2 penalties in the entire game. So unfortunately, not going to be good for them. We got the Falcons, and the Kings. Pretty sad game. I don't even know what to say about this game because they're both really bad teams. Looking at this, it doesn't even matter what happens. So honestly, I think looking at what we have with the Kings are 30th and 28th, while the Falcons are slightly better offense, but slightly worse defense. I'm going to go with I'm going to give the benefit to the Falcons here, but honestly, I don't even know what to say about this game. The Indians and the Saints face off. It's going to be the Indians. There's just nothing to say about that game. Although I think the Cincy are going to put up a good fight. Superman and the Angels. Superman have done great last week, but they've done pretty well. Angels have not. I'm going to go with the Superman winning this game. 8th and the Jets. This is a divisional matchup, I believe. And I believe the Jets need to win this game. I think the Elephants also need to win this game, too. Now, looking at this stats here for them, this is the outcome. Jets are out of the playoffs. They are the last team eliminated. The Jets need to win this game only for basically to make sure they don't do the terrible thing. As for the 8th, and they need to win this game just to be able to make it. They can still technically clinch the playoffs, clinch the division with a win. If they lose, they will be out. And unfortunately, I think the Jets are just way better in the context. I'm gonna go with the Jets winning this game. Knights and Browns, tough game. Knights have clinched into the playoffs, trying to get a higher seed. Browns are in the playoffs too, but neither. So this might be a pre-matchup from a later game because the 4th and 5th seed will play. I'm gonna go and say that the Knights win this game this week. It might be the Browns next week. Panthers and Otters, not the game of the week, but it comes down to this. This is actually the first game the Panthers have played that's not been at at Bank of America Stadium. They're playing at Fairchild Stadium, and this is the first time the Panthers have ever not played in NBL Stadium. So, yeah. Is that correct? Second time. They played preseason game before Wacken, but preseason we got rid of preseason a while back, a few years ago. So, yes. But this is the first time. I have to say, unfortunately, I do think the Panthers are going to be a better team at this team, and I do think it's going to be that. Also, we got the Tigers and the Cardinals. Tigers win that one. Stars and Techs. If the Stars somehow, I think the Techs win this game. If the Stars somehow win, we'll have no winless teams, and the Techs have just not done well. But they just they're hopefully will do better this week than they did last week. Then the game of the week. It's actually on Monday, which is the first time we've actually had to deal with this on Monday, is the Colts and the Huskies. Both these teams are in our division leaders. They're both already clinched the division, clinched a playoff position. This could be a matchup from a later time, later in the season. Not going to be week 1. Week 1's going to probably be something like the Lynx and the Huskies. It's going to be tough to say this game. I'm going to give the Huskies the win to keep their undefeated streak alive, but the Colts are going to put up a really good fight. That is the end for this week. Let's talk about the World Playoffs and the playoffs when it comes to it. I believe we've already decided something about the World Playoffs. Which one did I put in? That's not the one. Yeah. World Playoffs. Games the dates have already been decided and the times have already been decided. We don't know who's playing here with the NBL. We kind of have an idea, but the thing is we can't determine the actual seed rankings until we know until the end of the season. Because the way it works for the NBL playoffs is the teams that have the best, it means the teams that win the entire thing will have the highest and lowest seeds. So if the team that wins, no matter what their record is going to be the number 1 seed, the playoffs. Whoever who loses the playoffs, basically on the other side, is going to be the number 2 seed, and everything in our team is going to be decided off of ranking. So in theory, there's going to be 16 teams, but we don't know who's going to actually play, who, where. If the playoffs were to happen right now, If the World Playoffs were to happen, we don't even. I don't even know if I can answer this question. It's going to be It will be the Indians and Huskies being the number one, number two seeds. The Panthers will be number three. Uh, the Otters will be number four, and so on back and forth. I can't really give any information off of this because we don't know, and we don't even know when these. We only know that the games are happening. We don't know even where they're occurring. All the games are occurring at one location for each of these divisions. It's happening in one of the four stadiums. I don't know what the stadiums. I know that one of them is NBL Stadium. Can I get the confirmation? I know the four stadiums. NBL Stadium is one of them. Charles Stadium is another one. If I spelled wrong, my bad. We have YMCA Stadium. And the Fairchild Stadium is the last stadium. These stadiums are the ones that all will occur, which all of the games in one division in this little division section here would happen. So we don't know which ones are where because what happens is the team that ends up with the best record ends up deciding. So right now, it would be the Florida Gators, I believe. But we have two undefeated teams right now. I think if you looked at let's see, currently 16 divided by 18, 18 would be 0.88. 923 divided by 26 is 0.884. So actually, right now, the team that decides is going to end up being the. And it's basically so the Mountaineers are 14-4, which would be 14 divided by 18 because they have 18 games, 7%. So they would have the worst record right now. The Miners are leading by 18. They have an 888 record, and the last one we got the 23 divided by 26 to be 884. So right now, the order of this that it would be decided depends on it. So right now, the Mountaineers have the worst record. It would be the Miners, then the Florida Gators, then the Mountaineers, and then us. If it would actually be, we would be first. This division would be first because of the 18 games. However, that's not necessarily true because remember, if we go 16-0, it would be 16 divided by 16, which is 100%. But we could end up being 15 divided by 16, which is enough. So, if we have the only way that works is that if that one way this doesn't work for us to have the number one pick, or that the team managers have the number one pick, is if and only if the Indians and the Huskies both go 2-0, both lose 2-0, and that's what's going to happen from that. But that's only if they make it all the way to the playoffs too. So that's if for Sports Hour. There's a little bit of a bit longer than normal. But that's all for Sports Hour this week. Next week, we've got some interesting games. So we got some pretty tough games. We have the Otters and Packers trying to fight for first seed, and then everything else that are pretty much decided. We'll see you guys next week.